If your money goal is $1 million, there is a very good chance you are not building freedom. You are building a polite looking disaster. That number sounds responsible. It sounds mature. It sounds like the kind of number people nod at over dinner and call prudent. But a lot of what passes for prudence is just fear dressed in khakis. A small goal is not always a safe goal. Sometimes it is just surrender with a spreadsheet. I have spent my life watching capital move through the world, and I can tell you this much. Most people do not have a saving problem. They do not even have an investing problem. They have a power problem. They are trying to outrun a freight train with a lawnmower engine. That freight train is inflation. It does not knock on your door. It does not shout. It does not steal from you in one dramatic night. It just keeps shaving the purchasing power off your future until the number you worked for stops meaning what you thought it meant. That is why a lot of people who look disciplined for 40 years still end up fragile. They aimed for a number. They did not build enough engine. This is the first thing you need to understand. Nominal wealth and real freedom are not the same thing. You can arrive at retirement with a big round number and still discover you built a cardboard house. If you spend decades chasing a future million and that future million buys a fraction of what a million buys now, you did not win. You just took the scenic route to disappointment. That is the hidden cruelty of small goals. They feel sensible in the present because they let you avoid the emotional shock of the real math. But the real math does not care about your emotional comfort. I have seen people repeat the same bedtime fairy tale for years, save a little every month, invest consistently. Let compounding do the work. That advice is not entirely wrong. Compounding is real. Patience is real. Discipline is real. But the fairy tale leaves out the machine on the other side of the equation. If you save $100 a month for decades and pat yourself on the back because the future value looks large on paper, you may still wake up one day and realize the purchasing power of that number has been hollowed out. $1 million sounds rich until you realize future dollars do not buy present goods. If you think 1 million will give you $50,000 a year in passive income and a calm life, but that $50,000 only buys the equivalent of $8,000 of today's life, then the target was never a target. It was camouflage. A lot of people set goals in today's language and then retire in tomorrow's economy. That is not planning. That is self-deception. If you think you want 4 million because 4 million sounds large, you may actually need something more like 24 million in future dollars to preserve the life you imagine today. The exact number matters less than the mental shift. The shift is this. You do not set goals in vanity numbers. You set goals in future purchasing power. That one change alone will disturb you. Good, you should be disturbed, because most households are not underpowered by accident. They are underpowered because they were trained to admire restraint more than force. They were told to clip coupons, but never told to enlarge their engine. They were told salary was stability. They were told modest goals were wisdom. They were told to stay liquid, stay comfortable, stay realistic. Realistic, according to whom a system that benefits when you remain dependent will always call your dependence realistic. I want you to look at your current financial behavior, the way an engineer looks at a machine that keeps stalling. Stop asking whether you are a good person because you save something. Stop asking whether you are better than people who spend recklessly. That is moral theater. It does not build power. Ask a harder question. How much horsepower do I actually have? Because your financial life is an engine whether you admit it or not. It has fuel, it has leaks, it has timing, it has compression, it has parts that increase output and parts that choke output. If you do not understand the machine, you will spend your whole life polishing the hood while the thing barely moves. Your income is fuel, your spending is drag, your age is timing, your skill stack is your horsepower. Your investments are the transmission that turns all of that force into distance. Most people obsess over the transmission because that sounds sophisticated. They want the perfect stock, the perfect fund, the perfect entry point, the perfect allocation. That is what amateurs do. An amateur stares at the transmission because he has no engine. A serious operator asks how to make the machine stronger first. Let me make this painfully concrete. An extra $1,000 a month does not look glamorous to a person who thinks only in present comfort. It looks like a lot of inconvenience for not much visible reward. More work, more selling, more learning, more nights that do not feel balanced, so the person says it is not worth it. That is because he is pricing the extra 1,000 in tonight's emotions rather than tomorrow's compounding. An extra 1,000 invested consistently over a working lifetime can become an amount so large that it changes your category. The point is not whether the exact terminal number is 10 million or slightly less or slightly more under different assumptions. The point is that a small monthly increase if directed into the machine early, can produce an absurd difference in destination. The same thing works in reverse. A $500 indulgence is not $500. It is future force you burn for a mood. A belt that makes you feel expensive for one weekend can carry the price tag of many thousands in future purchasing power. A 3-year car lease can quietly consume the equivalent of a house down payment in tomorrow's money. This is why the middle class often feels cursed. They are not only paying retail, they are paying reverse compounding on every vanity decision. I call this the drag tax. Most people think expenses are about cash leaving the bank account. No, that is kindergarten. Real expenses are about future optionality leaving the machine. Every recurring payment that buys status without increasing output is drag. Every impulse purchase that makes you look richer before you are stronger is drag. Every habit that raises your baseline cost of living before you raise your earning power is drag. And drag is lethal when the engine is small. This is why young people so often get the whole picture backwards. They think they should wait until they earn more before they get serious. They think their current dollars are too small to matter. They think modest income excuses casual spending. In truth, the opposite is often closer to reality. A dollar saved and deployed early is not a small dollar. It is a high-pressure dollar. Time multiplies force. The difference between starting at 18 and starting at 28 is not a cute little gap. It can be the difference between building an engine with real thrust and building one that never quite leaves the ground. Those last 10 years you lose at the beginning do not come back politely. They disappear with the most valuable compounding window you had. That is why I never tell young people flexing is the behavior of someone who wants the appearance of power because he has not built actual power. When you are young, time is the only asset in the room that older people cannot buy back. Treat it like dynamite. And yet this is where the social cage gets you. You see someone older with a nicer car, a bigger apartment, a more polished life, and you think the game is to mimic the surface. So you buy symbols before you buy force. You take on fixed costs before you build output. You act like a finished product while your engine is still made of scrap. That is the salary trap. A salary can keep you alive. It can even make you look respectable. But if you do not convert part of that salary into an ownership machine or a skill engine, all you really have is a decorated dependency. You are still exchanging linear effort for temporary fuel. You are still one job loss, one bad manager, one health problem, one recession away from fear. Worker money pays bills, owner money buys time. Skill money expands both. You need to decide which game you are in. Here is the system shift. Stop thinking like a saver. Start thinking like an engine builder. An engine builder does 4 things. He increases the fuel rate. He reduces the drag. He advances the timing. He upgrades the parts. Those are the levers. The first lever is obvious and still massively neglected. Increase income. People love talking about cutting expenses because it feels virtuous and controlled. There is a place for that, but if you are making very little, there are only so many corners to cut before you are just living a smaller and smaller life. Income has asymmetry. There is only so much below your current number. There is a great deal above it. That is why I have always cared more about earning power than budgeting tricks. You can save your way into better habits. Freedom requires surplus. Surplus comes from power. Power comes from value. If you can find a way to make an extra $200, $500, $1,000 a month and direct that into the machine, you are no longer making side money. You are injecting fuel. That small extra stream can be the beginning of refusal power. It can be the first moment you stop feeling owned by next month's rent. The second lever is drag control. I am not talking about fake monk behavior. I am not telling you to become a joyless accountant of your own life. I am telling you to stop pretending that lifestyle inflation is harmless. There is a difference between spending that expands capability and spending that advertises identity. Capability spending can be rational. Identity spending is usually drag. The rich get richer not only because they earn more, but because they are often better at distinguishing between the two. A person who buys a used car with cash and keeps his fixed costs low is not being cheap. He is preserving engine pressure. A person who splits housing costs aggressively in the early years is not failing adulthood. He is choosing compression over appearance. A person who keeps food simple while building something larger is not deprived. He is refusing drag. I have known operators who lived on protein shakes, simple fast meals, old cars they owned outright, and cramped arrangements they could have escaped sooner if they wanted to impress people. They were not trying to look successful. They were trying to become difficult to stop. That is a better use of youth. The third lever is timing. What matters is not only how much you invest, but how early and how automatically you force it into the machine. I have seen two useful patterns. One is the waterline rule. You decide on a baseline cash reserve, maybe $5,000 or $10,000 or some other number appropriate to your life, and everything above that line gets invested. The other is the force first rule. You decide on a fixed monthly investment target and then build your life around hitting it no matter what. Both can work, but I will tell you something I have observed over and over. People who become truly wealthy often think in the second pattern. They do not say, "I will invest whatever happens to remain after life has taken its bite." They say, "I will feed the machine first, and then I will arrange the rest of life around what is left." That is not just a tactic. It is an identity. One person asks whether he can afford to invest. The other asks what he must become to make the investment inevitable. Those are very different people after 10 years. The fourth lever is where almost everybody hesitates, and that hesitation is expensive. Upgrade the parts. In plain English, buy skills, not random information, not entertainment disguised as education, not ego candy, skills. Skills that raise your earning floor. Skills that make you more dangerous in the marketplace. Selling, marketing, copywriting, advertising, negotiation, product design, operations, recruiting, leadership, distribution, anything that can predictably convert effort into value and value into income belongs in the machine. This is the part where cautious people tighten up. They are comfortable spending on gadgets, meals, vacations, cars, clothes, rent, and hobbies that evaporate. But ask them to spend money on a skill that might increase income for decades, and suddenly they become strict philosophers of certainty. That is backwards. The highest return investment for most ordinary people is not some exotic financial instrument. It is the skill that permanently raises how much fuel they can push through the machine each year. If $2,000 spent learning a marketable skill can move someone from a $30,000 income to a $90,000 income, that is not an expense. That is a part upgrade with a ridiculous payback period. If after taxes and lean living that produces $35,000 a year in additional investable surplus, then the original $2,000 decision did not create a one-time benefit. It created a new engine class. That is how real acceleration happens. Not from clipping a few extra coupons forever, from changing the machine. People ask why this is so hard to accept. I will tell you why. Pain is visible. Return is uncertain. If I spend money on a course, tutor, mentor, workshop, or community, today I feel the loss today. I know exactly what I gave up. I could have used that money for rent, comfort, status, rest, convenience, relief. The benefit, by contrast, is invisible at first. It asks for more work, more failure, more repetition, more humiliation, more time before the result feels real. So the average person does what the average person always does. He chooses the pain he understands over the pain that would free him. That is the hidden stall tax. You stay where you are because uncertainty feels expensive. Even though stagnation is far more expensive, ego makes it worse. A lot of people would rather waste 5 years pretending to teach themselves than pay for 1 year of compressed learning. They call it independence, Half the time it is vanity. They do not want to feel behind. They do not want to need instruction. They do not want to risk paying the wrong person and looking foolish. Fine, then pay with time. The market accepts both currencies. But do not lie to yourself and call the slower route superior just because it protects your pride. I would rather learn from someone who has already walked the road than spend years reinventing what they could teach me in months. I would rather pay for speed than romanticize struggle. I would rather suffer the embarrassment of being a beginner in the right room than enjoy the ego of being the smartest person in a room that cannot move me. That is rational. You do not need to worship gurus to understand this. In fact, you should be careful. A lot of the education market is badly sequenced. Someone will sell you a turbocharger when your chassis is cracked and your transmission is missing teeth. Then when you do not get the outcome, they say you did not try hard enough. Sometimes that is true. Often it is a sequence error. I call it stage mismatch. A teacher may know the advanced move and still be useless to a beginner if he cannot identify the missing parts beneath the surface. If someone can only teach step 6 to people who still need steps 1 through 5. The problem is not necessarily that learning is fake. The problem is that the machine was upgraded in the wrong order. That is why you need judgment. Do not buy promises, buy feedback, buy compression. Buy environments where people ahead of you can see what is missing. Buy reps, buy accountability. Buy the next part, not the fantasy of the final outcome. This is also why I like to think of skill acquisition, not as inspiration, but as assembly. One skill alone may not transform your life. One better sales process may not be enough. One advertising lesson may not be enough. One negotiation framework may not be enough. One community may not be enough. So what? A missing engine does not become useless because the first piston arrives before the others. You are assembling force. That is the mindset. One skill closes one gap. Another skill closes another. One day it all feels useless because the machine still does not run. Then one day enough parts are in place and the entire thing turns over. From the outside it looks sudden. From the inside it was sequence. That is why I like people who become collectors of useful capability. They do not ask whether a single lesson will make them rich by Friday. They ask whether this new capability increases the total intelligence of the machine. They see themselves as the asset. They do not worship outcomes before they deserve them. Once you understand that, you start behaving differently inside good rooms. Instead of entering a community asking what you can take, you start asking what you can contribute that exposes you to stronger operators. If you know sales, help people with sales. If you know systems, help people with systems. If you know content, help people with content. If you give 6 hours of genuine value and someone much farther ahead gives you 1 hour of concentrated insight in return, you often came out absurdly ahead. Their 1 hour may compress a year of wandering. Poor people are often too cheap with the one asset they actually still possess, time. They guard it like misers and then spend it on distraction. A better strategy is to spend time deliberately where it buys compression. That means free material when free material is enough. That means low-cost communities when you need examples and pattern recognition. That means more serious rooms when you need direct feedback, in-person context, and proximity to people whose normal is far above your current ceiling. Do not get confused by the price tag alone. Expensive can be foolish. Cheap can be powerful. Free can be enough for a while. The real question is whether the environment increases repetition and feedback. Effort without feedback is slow. Effort with feedback is ignition. I have seen operators become dangerous because they force themselves into loops that ordinary people avoid. One man sets aside a fixed percentage of income every month as a learning budget. Not entertainment, not leisure. Learning, experimentation, testing. He forces himself to spend it on things that might sharpen the machine. Sometimes it fails, he loses money. Good, the willingness to lose money intelligently is part of staying ahead. I have seen others take that same principle and apply it directly to growth. They hear a stronger operator describe how he treats experimentation as a duty, not a luxury, and suddenly they stop treating investment in growth as a moral crime. They increase ad spend, they buy time with someone better, they enter better rooms, they stop acting like every dollar must be preserved in amber. And once that mental lock breaks, Revenue can change categories in months. The point is not that you should imitate every tactic. The point is that timid capital stays timid. When you are early, every extra dollar feels sacred because it is scarce. I understand that, but if you never learn to reallocate part of your current comfort toward future output, you will remain trapped worshiping survival. That is not wealth. That is just prolonged tension. And let me say something uncomfortable. A lot of what people call being responsible is really just being underambitious in a socially approved way. They will proudly announce that they save a little, that they maxed out restraint, that they avoided risk, that they never bought instruction, that they never looked foolish, that they waited until they felt ready. Then 20 years pass, the engine is still weak, their costs are higher, their habits are older, their courage is lower. And now they have less time to fix what they should have fixed when the machine was light. That is why I push hard on this. You do not need softer goals. You need stronger force. You need a target that accounts for future dollars, not present vanity. You need more fuel, less drag, better timing, and higher output parts. You need to stop treating every expense equally. You need to stop confusing comfort with safety. You need to stop admiring the look of adulthood more than the economics of freedom. You need to understand that the market does not reward your good intentions. It rewards the value you can produce, the capital you can allocate, and the discipline with which you feed the machine. I am not asking you to become reckless. I am asking you to become honest. Honest about how small your current goal may be. Honest about how much inflation is eroding while you congratulate yourself for standing still. Honest about the cost of every drag, inducing purchase. Honest about the payoff of genuine skill. Honest about the fact that no one is coming to enlarge your engine. You will do that or you will not. That is the test. Not whether you like these ideas, not whether you agree in principle, not whether you feel inspired tonight. The test is what happens to the next extra dollar. Does it feed drag or force? Does it buy appearance or capability? Does it preserve your current identity or expand your future refusal power? Because that next dollar is not a dollar. It is a vote for the machine you will live inside. You can keep building a delicate little engine that sounds respectable and dies on the first real hill. Or you can build enough power that inflation, layoffs, bad luck, and social pressure do not get the final word. One path lets you look normal for a while. The other path lets you become free. Most people will choose normal. That is why freedom stays expensive. Now choose.